Welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. It's going to be about global warming in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates toward an inevitable post-oil era. Thank you for joining us, the panelists first, and also all the audience who are interested in this area of the world. The webinar unfolding, so we'll do first an introduction. And after that, we'll be discussing 3 chapters. Chapter number 1 will be discussing the impact of global warming in Gulf countries. Following up with chapter number 2 will be the strategy of energy transition in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. And ending up with the last, not the least, the role of local regulatory bodies and civil societies to combat climate change. Once the debates will be finished, we will pass to the Q&A. So it will be about 20-minute Q&A, where the audience will be allowed to ask their questions. And we end up the conference with an announcement, few announcements. I will be your moderator tonight. And I will ask direct questions to the speakers. Hoping that we get an answer in less than 3 minutes. And of course, other speakers are allowed to bounce back and comment on questions. Audience are invited to ask questions in the chat box. However, we'll ask them to specify the name of the speakers to whom they address the question. And based on available time, our organizer team will be select few questions which will be addressed by the specific speaker. In order to answer maximum of question, we will ask our panelists tonight to answer the audience question in less than 2 minutes. However, for question we didn't cover tonight, ESSEC alumni will communicate the speaker's response later to the audience. Okay, so this is basically the framework. Without any delaying, I will start the webinar. So, as you know, in the run-up to the Glasgow Climate Summit COP26, Saudi Arabia announced a net zero greenhouse gas emission plan by 2060 as a pillar of the new Saudi Green Initiative. At the same time, United Arab Emirates launched an energy strategy in 2050, which considered to be the first unified energy strategy in the country that is based on supply and demand. The webinar will be an opportunity to learn about Kingdom Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates strategies plans on the reduction of carbon emissions, learn from their experience and change best practices. To do so, we have a group of experts who join me tonight. Very, very highly rich panel. First of all, we have Janet Rogan, which is the COP26 regional ambassador for the Middle East and Africa.
Hi.
Hey,
hello, everybody. Hi.
Thank you, Janet, for joining us tonight. Janet, she's a foreigner. She joined the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office and served in Middle East and Africa, and has worked with NATO as UK political advisor, and also worked in United Nations as UNA resident coordinator. She have an extended humanitarian experience bringing the principle of Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 and the Global Climate Change Agreement. Second, we have Dr. Mustapha Taoumi, who is a clean energy key expert. He working in EUGCC Clean Energy Technology Network. Dr. Taoumi has been leading renewable energy and efficiency projects and technology deployment for over 35 years. He worked in regional program office for North Africa and Middle East within the International Renewable Energy Agency, RNA. And since 2016, he's working with European Union and GCC for the Clean Energy Technology Network. Our third panelist is an ESSEC alumni, Tanguy, to Bienassis, Energy Investment and Finance Analyst at International Energy Agency. Sorry if I didn't spell your last name correctly, Tanguy. Tanguy is an expert in climate and energy finance. He specialized in investment related to energy transition, notably in building, air transport, but also in coal phase out and carbon pricing mechanism. Previously, Tanguy worked for 9 years at the World Bank, financing greenhouse gases reduction and energy access projects, participation in climate negotiation. Our second alumni for the night is Grégory Fayet. He's the CEO of EDF Renewables. And Grégory began his career with EDF in research and development divisions in 2007. He worked as manager and group manager. And in 2017, he was appointed the general manager of EDF in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And in 2020, September 2020, he became the CEO of EDF Renewables.
For Saudi Arabia only side, but I think you appreciate.
Thank you, thank you. And of course, our Karim, last not least, Karim Megherbi, is the founder and executive director of EPDA. So it's a platform for renewable energy. We have headquarters in Dubai. After 2 years in activity, he has closed about 207 megawatts of wind and solar projects in 5 different countries. And he has more than 1 gigawatt under mandate within leading IPP and investors. He also acting as director of transaction advisor and think tank in the MENA region, which he represents at the ARENA Coalition of Action. So without any further, so I will welcome our panelists to join us, and now we will asking them questions. And the debate can start. So the first question will be about the impact of global warming in the Gulf country. And let's asking this. Okay. So, and my question is going to be to Janet. So, the continued temperature rising caused by global warming contribute to the water scarcity, drought, rising sea level, and aridity. Could you help us, because you've been working in the region and you've been very close to the reality, so to understand the direct repercussion of global warming in the region of these 2 countries?
Hi, and thank you very much for the question, Said. Welcome to the other panel members. I would say in all of these issues, you can't only take the 2 countries, of course, because these impacts, especially when we're talking about temperature, water salinity, desertification, etc., really cut across boundaries. It doesn't respect the borders. But I think you will also see, if I take the wider region, going all the way up through the Levant, North Africa, and the Gulf, you see a whole range of issues. You see some temperatures have risen already as much as 2 degrees has been reported in Qatar. Even 1 degree in Jordan. Most of these countries are very poor in water, naturally. If I take another part of the region, Jordan, it probably has enough water for maybe 2 million people. And there are currently 11.5 million inside the borders. So there's already some level of impact which is being felt. There is, at the same time, also efforts being made to change that. So how do you address water scarcity? You use technology. And we're already seeing that very broadly across the Gulf area, more widely, and across the Middle East in general, for water desalination. At the same time, that is very energy intensive. So you have a big drain on your energy requirements, an expensive, polluting production of energy, unless you switch to more renewable sources of energy. So fortunately, I think we've seen quite a lot of moves across the region to start looking at the alternatives and invest in alternative energy, so that you can in fact start that The other impact of desalination, of course, is that you get hotter, more intense brine to put back into the sea. That in itself has an impact on the marine environment, has an impact on biodiversity in the water, but you've also got problems of biodiversity in land because of the creeping desertification, because of the temperature rises, because of the lack of water. It's very simple. People and creatures on Earth need water, need food, need shelter from the extremes of weather, whether it's hot or cold, as a bare minimum to be able to live. And as a bare minimum for development, you need energy. So this region is really at the heart of, I would say, some of the biggest impact in climate that we're already seeing, but also in some of the responses for what you need to do in order to manage to live in the 21st century, in a 21st century way, without trying to go back to the way we used to live hundreds of years ago. So I really see that this is a very crucial area, a very crucial region in climate action and response. And I would hope to see even more of a leadership coming out of this region over the next 5 to 10 years. Let me stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. That was very, very clear answer. And also bring me to my next question that I want to ask the panelists, which is just like about what kind of solution that could be provided to deal with it. And here it's, I want to ask Grégory a question, because today Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are found in geographic area with quality wind and solar resources, an emerging market with high potential that's facing growing energy needs. So there is the two countries are growing, they have new young population, they have a lot of people immigrating to them, and we see renewable projects rising everywhere, such as the latest one project by EDF Renewable in Saudi Arabia with about 1.5 gigawatts, and have this amazing competitive price, about less than 1 cent a kilowatt an hour. So my question basically, which is going to be to Grégory, what are the socioeconomic benefits of this project?
Okay, good evening, Said. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be part of this panelist to start. I will say first, energy transition has started. It is something that has to be said. Energy transition has started both in UAE, both in Saudi Arabia. Right now, if I want to focus more on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom has announced his will, his ambition to have an electricity mix by 2030 composed at 50% by renewable. And in parallel of that, the Kingdom has the will to develop then 60 gigawatts of renewable by 2030. So this energy transition has started. Part of this 60 gigawatt, 2/3 will be solar and 1/3 will be wind. I think this is something very important to be noticed. Since 2017, the Kingdom, through Energy Ministry, has awarded or provided up to 5 gigawatts of renewable project at for different developers or companies. And it is regarding my company that I represent, EDF Renewable. We have today, to give an example, 400 megawatts of wind project that has been almost finalized. The construction is almost achieved, and 300 megawatts of PV project that are under construction. I think it's something also to be said regarding this energy transition. Saudi Arabia has today the cheapest tariff for both wind and solar. It means that there is today no country elsewhere in the world that we can get cheapest tariff than wind and solar. It is Saudi Arabia that has the world record prices. So Saudi Arabia has the cheapest oil, should have the cheapest gas, and has today and should have in the future the cheapest renewable prices. Why? I would say for three main reasons. First one, I would say it is obviously the quality of the wind and solar resources. Second reason, I would say it is due to the land. Saudi and the Middle East in general, I would say main characteristic for a renewable player like us, it is the size of the renewable plant that are being tendering. And for example, EDF Renewable also succeed in winning 1,500 megawatt renewable project this year, 2021. It is the second reason is the size of the project. And the third reason why I would say Saudi Arabia is also the cheapest tariff in the world is all these projects are being done with project financing, and I would say the financial guarantee or signature of Saudi Arabia, I would say, matters a lot for a player like us. Thanks, Said.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's very important. And I don't know if any of the guest speakers have anything to have any comment on regarding Grégory intervention. If not, I will head up to the second chapters of the evening, which is the strategy of energy transition in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. We see that there is, as Grégory mentioned, that there is a lot of projects going on. And today we are in very competitive price. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates was a leader in the energy sectors. So basically what we understand, so they are coming back to become or want to become that energy leader in the energy, but in the renewable and the clean energy. Which brings me to my next question that I would like to address to the Dr. Mustapha Taoumi, which about EUGCC network. So basically we understand this is a relationship between the GCC's countries and the European countries. So that's been kind of organizing to maintain and strengthening the cooperation between these two entities in the area of clean energy. So I would like, Dr. Mustapha, can you help us a little bit understand the key role of this organization and what are the projects and businesses opportunities who've been born from this cooperation in the energy sector?
Thank you, Sally, giving me this opportunity, and I would introduce the network as an instrument, or as you will say, a facilitator of cooperation between the EU and the GCC. Facilitators in terms of approaching the views and also approaching the stakeholders, having a common platform to debate the common topics of mutual interest, and also leveraging some initiatives, and also building capacities. That is, I think, one of our mission is to have this knowledge platform and share this information, and having also a better understanding of the needs from the EU side and from the GCC side, and try to have a common approaches and common goals. The two regions are different in terms of their economies, in terms of their their goals, and the EU from the technology side, they are doing a lot of effort, and they are far away from other countries in the MENA region, not only in the technology side, but also on the policy side. And in many countries in the MENA region, they are lacking policy, they are lacking also capacities, and they are lacking also finance resources. That is one of the facts. From the GCC side, at the contrary, they have finance resources, but maybe they are lacking also human capacities. In this sense, the network is doing a lot of effort to train those young people, young engineers, fresh and graduated engineers, technicians, all those people that they are looking for jobs. And also matchmaking also stakeholders, matchmaking actors from both sides, from the public and the private side, because our network is inclusive. we're not targeting, a specific, actor, but we are trying also to bring all those people together, private, public, academia, and have a debate on those challenging topics that are climate change and energy transitions. That is, I think, the lesson that we learned from the EU through the Green Deal, and before the Green Deal, they were also looking for decarbonizing, but now with the Paris Agreement and the COPs, all those things, all the countries in the EU, but also in the GCC, they are looking to speed up, all those projects and those initiatives. And you well mentioned those initiatives in the GCC that are a little bit, similar that the EU, but there is no regional framework. That is one aspect. The EU, they have, this regional approaches, they have the regional directives and their targets, but the GCC is still at the early stage of development of this regional initiative. Saudi Arabia, they launched this Middle East Green Initiative. This is very important. And now we gather, all those countries together to have, this initiative, going forward. So we are learning from the EU, but also the EU is learning from the GCC, because GCC is a market for clean energy for the future. I think for hydrogen, for all those clean technologies. And there is a lot of benefit that you can also take from that region.
That's wonderful, Dr. Mustapha. So we understand that there is a transfer of knowledge between the EU and GCC, and in both sides, in both directions, which is just like this is how ideas get created and how business opportunities like doing that type of collaboration and I will say group of work. So in terms of like, are you like in your organization, like is something like today you have a concrete project that you are working on in the short terms?
No, we are not dealing with projects. As I said, we are an instrument. We are working with the Commission under the guidance of the Commission, under the guidance of the GCC Secretariat General, which is based in Riyadh. So there is a kind of energy expert group, EUGCC expert group that are meeting. Every year, every 2 years, and they are also discussing, those common topics, and they are recommending to the network to do things, to do trainings, to do study tours. We are bringing people from the GCC to Europe to see in the realities and touch base with the technologies, discuss with the expert there, instead of having only those PowerPoints. We are also approaching these people, and the possibility also to learn from the ground, instead of having also only those workshops. So that is, I think, we have a work plan, and we are working in 5 main areas: in renewables, energy efficiency, demand side management, carbon capture, and the usage, hydrogen, interconnection, because GCC, they have also interconnection authority. And that is, I think, for each topic, you have some key priorities and activities, not projects, but if there is a project that we can facilitate, that will be one of our mission, is to facilitate the implementation of this project. But we are not doing or not implementing those projects.
Excellent, excellent, Doctor. Thank you for the clarification. And adopting the technology for renewable energy. So this is very key to development or for the transition. However, even we heard a lot during the COP26. This is the right time for renewable. The price continue to drop. Technology are adopted, which is going to bring me to my next question that I will ask Tanguy. Like today, like we understand the technology is there. There is a lot of technology transfer between countries. There is instrument that's been created to develop that. But they're saying all this cannot happen without the international investment. So my question is how IEA see the financing of green transition to reach the net zero 2050, about the long-term strategy on market development and the political role. So question kind of like to get this understanding how, because you are very close to the markets, you understand the importance of international investment. So how do you evaluate that?
Thanks, Said, and hello everyone from Paris. So I will base my response to your question on our latest report, which is the World Energy Outlook, where we, and it's not the first time, we've been doing this for many years, but we are warning the world against a mismatch between the levels of investment in oil and gas supply and the investment in clean energy technologies. So what I mean by this is that currently the world is not investing enough to meet its future energy needs, be it in oil and gas, which is geared to a world of stagnant or declining demand, or in transition-related energy efficiency. The investment is not rising fast enough. So if we look at the case of oil and gas, upstream investment is actually now half of what it was in 2014, while the oil and gas demand is roughly staying the same. It's not moving much. Even if you account the pandemic has just put a dent in it, it's not meaningful when we look at the numbers. So what we see is that the oil and gas industry is able to do a bit more with less. The upstream operations are leaner and more efficient. But still, the new normal that we see for oil and gas investment appears to be declining. We see less and less investment in oil and gas. And in practice, what it means is actually, and this finding was surprising to me personally, is that investment in oil and gas production today is actually aligned, is Paris aligned, if you will. It's aligned with net zero targets. What is not aligned with net zero targets is the other side of the equation, the investment in clean energy technologies, which is rising slowly. But while the oil and gas is declining, the investment in clean energy is not picking up enough. Today, we estimate that we stand at about $1 trillion of annual investment in clean energy. We think that to reach net zero goals, between now and 2030, so 9 years, it needs to triple and reach almost $4 trillion. And that's very important. I want to stress that, because if you don't have this boost in clean energy investment, then you're not able to have the drop in oil and gas investment and maintain energy security, which at the IEA is very keen to us. We were created on the basis to maintain energy security. So I think that's very important. That the world doesn't look away and doesn't look at nice projects that are implemented on the ground. It's very nice, but it's not enough. It needs to triple within the next 3 years. And so I will leave it there for now.
Thanks, Tanguy. Thanks for the clarification. We have let know how I was muting myself. And I know that we have another panelist today who is really, really involved in the advancement for renewable energy. And I would like to address my question to Karim, who founder of EPDA. So to give his intake when it's come to the investment, when it's come to renewable energy and kind of challenges they're facing to develop projects in the area.
Well, thank you, Said. Well, actually, I mean, that's when you look at the numbers, it's you have to agree with Tanguy. So there's no other way. The investments are not aligned with what they should be, at least for a 1.5 degree trajectory. And as mentioned, we should install actually 1 terawatt. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tanguy. We should install 1 terawatt per year, actually in 2030. And last year we were 260 gigawatts. So it means that basically we need to, grow by, I don't know, more than 15% per year. And last year the growth was below 10%, I guess. So we really need to invest more. So now, how do we do that? So, well, I won't say that I have the, let's say, global vision of EIA, obviously, because in my work, I'm focusing on several markets only. But to be fair, there is plenty of money actually in the markets. You do have equity available and very large equity funds which are ready to invest in projects. But the regulatory framework is sometimes challenging. So as actually Grégory put it rightly, I mean, when you go in the GCC, you have this experience of project finance in the oil and gas, and therefore the financial structure, with the contractual structure, guarantees, and so on, this is perfect. So whenever, you can just tender 10 gigawatts, to say everybody will not everybody actually, it's against for big, very large players, and you see always the same players, by the way. So you do have the large players involved in these tenders. You see them also whenever the IFC, World Bank, actually the structure programs such as the scaling solar, for example, in solar, and they would like to implement the same in wind, but obviously it's targeting only, some markets only, right? And you need much more. So what I see, from my little window is that, many markets actually are very challenging, either in terms of regulatory framework, in terms of currency risk, and so on. If you take, for example, a country like Vietnam, where actually investments are booming, you see the contractual framework is not adapted actually for international financing at all. And so lenders, they just don't go there. I mean, they're starting somehow to come, but it's very difficult. So far the financing has been, with local financing, very challenging and so on. And if you want to actually get away completely from coal, then, you need to do more, and you need to attract international investors. When you look at, for example, India also, you can see actually that projects have been delayed for many reasons. Among them, you had the land issue, and also you had the DISCO, actually, distribution company, that were, some of them, for example, with the COVID, they were strongly impacted. So you do have 6-9 months of delay of payment. So although you do have project financing available in the country, it's actually quite difficult to reach the target. So now India has reached a target of, I believe, 300 or 400 gigawatt, by 2030, and they set before 2045 gigawatt for, I think it was for next year, and we reached the 150, but including hydro, whereas actually it was only hydro, wind and solar. So we are delayed. That's very clear. If you look at Europe now, it's the same story. It's not enough. Even in our country, France, actually, we do need to triple the investments. It's very clear. We have this document from our grid operator RTA, which mentioned the investment, the pathway to go to 2030, and both in wind and solar, we need to triple the investments starting now, starting tomorrow. So there is the money in the market, but definitely we need to, think about how to structure the regulatory framework. And in each country, you have a different regulatory framework. So it's, every country has its own challenges, but policies will play certainly a very big role.
Which is, 100% when it's come to investments. So it's today, yes, it's something we can see it when we've been following the COP26, that this is one of the biggest issues that facing renewable. And I like, this is one of the angles we would like to discuss tonight. And there's another angle which is parallel to investment, is about business model. So we have lots of companies today that joining us for the webinar, and we would like to discuss the business model. And so my taking for that, we know that the decarbonization of industry will not be an easy, especially among the 4 big sectors that contribute about 45% to carbon dioxide emissions, like cement, steel, ammonia, or ethylene. Companies that adopt low carbon production process will still short to mid-terms to increasing costs. So basically these companies who are trying to reduce, they will see their costs go higher, ultimately placing them at economic disadvantage in competitive global commodities market. So my questions, again, I'm going to ask the expert network from EUGCC. what are the business models that promote the development of clean energy technology today? Mustapha?
Thank you, Said. Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. I think business model, there is no unique business model for clean energy, as we have plenty of technologies, and we have also different sectors, different situations, also socioeconomic situation in the countries. So local circumstances and all those, indicators, socioeconomic indicators. So maybe if I may, for the utility, just give an example to be clear in my message. For utility, for example, scale projects, there is now it's going with auctions, because business model, we have to, as Karim mentioned, we have to be clear. We have to have clear policies and regulations. Without those policies, I'm not sure that we can succeed. Political will at this first. I think a country without a political will, all the bodies will not follow. And then they have to translate this political will in concrete policies and regulations, and have also the finance resources. That's the other part. If we are lacking resources, we cannot implement projects. So that is a dilemma. And we have now a business model that's with auctions. It's the main, instrument that the majority of countries, not only in the GCC, but all over the world, they are, following and they are implementing. The auctions, that is, I think, one of the positive elements is to reduce the cost of renewables. And behind this, we have the contract between the off-taker, the utility, and the developer, or the consortium, or the company won the bid. So there is a PPA. So that is, I think, very important. That's it's the same as there is no magical PPA for renewables, but it's the same format, the same it's a legal document, but they also have the rights and also the all the regulations there, because the project will have 25 years, a lifetime. 25 years. It's a lot of years, but there is a security. There is a commitment from the off-taker that he will pay the electricity that he buy from the project developer. That is, I think, very important to highlight this. And one of the elements is the finance. That is another aspect that I wanted also to highlight, is the public-private partnership, because in some countries they are struggling to get this finance resources, but with the private sector, with the private finance coming from banks, from other parties, they can join hands with the public authorities in the country, and then they can build those projects. And I think a lot of example here in the UAE and in Morocco, this PPP scheme is very useful and helpful for implementing those projects. For example, second example is for the rooftop, for the small scale technology projects. Then we can highlight that the leasing scheme is now in Dubai, for example. It works very well, and even for the industry or the commercial facilities, they are using this leasing, and this is facilitating a lot because they are lacking the resources. So the leasing is like a de-risking instrument, for those projects that they are capital intensive. That is one of the elements. Is a bit different, in comparison with oil and gas. And you have to pay at the first year. You have to pay the whole project. So that is, I think, the leasing combined with net metering. This is another aspect that we can talk about. It is net metering. Now it's emerging in the GCC as a solution for the utility, but also for the consumer.
Thank you, Dr. Mustapha. Thank you for the clarification. And now talking about business model, and in order to have this business model flourish and succeed, we will go to we need to have regulatory bodies behind them to support them. And one of the questions that we will be kind of asking here in Europe and trying to understand, like, how we can create mechanism and regulatory bodies to develop or reduce the gas emission. And Karim, he's been involved in both in France and in United Arab Emirates and around the world to see a lot of regulation and legislation that's been developed. And I'm going to basically try to understand from Karim, from your experience. Here in Europe, for example, we are at forefront of the climate fight. Europe has adopted many packages in that direction. The last one of it called Fit for 55. So basically reduce gas emission by 55% at least to 2030 compared to 1990. Like the green taxonomy mechanism, a label for green financing, allowing investors to know whether their investments comply with the objective defined of the Green Deal for Europe. And there is many other green initiatives developed here in Europe. So my question basically, because you've been involved in both markets, what are the mechanisms of local regulatory bodies to deal with GHG emission in Dubai?
Well, look at they are doing a lot actually in the UAE, either through energy efficiency, either through this 2050 energy strategy and so on. So they are, preparing, their energy transition. But, here it's mostly driven by economy, right? And business somehow. The fact that the oil and gas demand will be lower, and I saw a question actually popping up about it in the chat box, where actually who has to decrease the lead the energy transition. Well, the GCC will be strongly impacted, by the energy transition. Oil and gas revenues, this is, a large part of the GDP. And so, and I think in the IEA report, in the net zero, it's very clear that it's a big issue. So you do have, they're looking at other business models, like, for example, green hydrogen and so on. But at least as per the IEA, when they calculate, the revenues, but it's difficult actually to fill the gap that will be implicated. So basically, the question is more about what's the business model here for the GCC region. So basically, in the electricity sector, it's very clear. In the electricity sector, as Grégory mentioned, there is no other places in the world. I mean, there are a few other places, but it's one of the places in the world where the electricity from renewable energy is the cheapest. So it's even cheaper than the marginal cost of CCGT. So there's absolutely zero reason for either Saudi or Dubai to ban gas at all. And even actually the UAE, they are importing gas, So not only it's, an economic benefit, but also, it's a less dependency. And that's why you do have a lot of interconnections, discussion in the GCC, and they are implementing very large, renewable energy programs. And now that the price has fallen as $10, per megawatt hour, all these countries, they will revise their strategy, and they will just they should accelerate, but not really for the CO2 emissions. It's mostly because actually there is a strong economic interest to do that, But electricity is only part of the CO2 emissions. Then you have the oil for the vehicles, for example. and you have, gas, for the industry and so on. So here you have different business models. First of all, for, I would say, transportation, the business model to me is not very clear, and at least for the UAE, or it's not so clear today, because actually this is the local demand for oil. So if I go for electricity, then how much money I will make to do that. So going to electricity in the transportation, it's a tough one. It's you need to think about how much how you can get something about. So either you will produce batteries, either you will produce locally. I don't know. For now, last time, but these are changing very rapidly. But last time I discussed that. The business model was not very clear, and actually it was more a question: why would we go to electric? But you do have chargers, and coming, etc. No, for the industry, it's another thing. So, for example, the difference between Europe and here is that there's no subsidy. The green hydrogen here, it's thought to be economical. Economically makes sense, and that's why in Saudi you have the Newen project. And last time, Aqua Power, when we had this our DII summit a few weeks ago, Aqua Power mentioned that very clearly. We have an off-taker. We have an off-taker. We believe that it's possible to produce green hydrogen. So you don't have hundreds of off-takers, obviously, today at the price that they're going to produce it. But you do have some off-takers, and they believe that large projects, off-takers, commercially viable, etc. That's how they're going to develop the business. So the UAE for now, the GDP from oil, it's roughly 30%. So they did actually, for many years, they tried to diversify their economy. I don't know. I think for Grégory, I don't remember exactly, but I think for Saudi, it's not like that, right? The GDP is much more dependent actually on oil and gas, I believe. So the transition is not there. So for the industry, now the question is, what kind of new business model they will do? So for example, if you think about green hydrogen, and the fact that there will be no other places where green hydrogen will be at the lowest cost, than Chile and Australia and the GCC, why not having the industries that would actually require green hydrogen to relocate somehow in the GCC? And that's something which is discussed in the region. So if you do have industries going for green hydrogen, you have this electricity part, which is going green. Now the question is more, how do you electrify this, everything? And that this part electrification, it's not yet clear, for example, for transportation, which is, a big part also of the CO2 emissions. But for building and so on, then also you have a big part, which is energy efficiency. So like many countries, like in Europe, for example, the target for the UAE is to decrease by, I remember, 40%, I think, the energy consumption. So you do have this strategy, and you see, for example, and Mustapha knows that much better than me, I believe, this ESCO model. So you have an ESCO model, which is being implemented in the UAE, and which is working actually, but they started with public buildings, and it will go, step by step to the private, buildings. But they want to, build actually an ESCO model, an ESCO ecosystem actually, which is quite sophisticated actually, with a national ESCO, then which will going to counter guarantee some private ESCO companies, etc. So they are going in this direction. But again, thinking that the UAE or GCC will lead somehow the energy transition in the terms of fighting for a carbon tax, that I'm not sure that will be the first to request this carbon tax. But are they going to transit because they have an economic, reason to do that? Yeah, I think yes, most probably they think about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Karim. Absolutely, yes. Carbon tax is going to be a very big fight, especially coming from the region where, just like as we say, like have a great dependency on oil and gas. But everything's coming when it's time, and this is the purpose of webinar like this and the COP26 and all the instruments that they are out there, that trying to go there and develop, a very peaceful transition to green energy. And I'm very happy that you already make the contrast between what's happened in Europe and what's happened right now in the ground, which is, this is the purpose of the webinar, basically. At the same time, I would like to bounce on this about, you know, like all these solutions when it's come to hydrogen, when it's come to transportation. I have a question specific to Grégory, who's CEO of EDF. So as you know, Grégory, like in France, electricity from renewable sources is promoted through a feed-in tariff, a premium tariff. So the technology-enabled energy transition are not economically and financially competitive. So in the last report of two bodies that organizing the energy sector in France, PPE and SNPC, National Low Carbon Strategy, have announced that they have a lump sum of public subsidies. They have the subsidies that will support the transition. It's about between 116 to 130 billion euros by 2028 that will be pushed in the economy of economic green transition. So in terms of facilitating in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or even in Middle East in general, what mean like, how do you facilitate the promote of the development of renewable energy in that area compared to what's happening in France? We don't need to have subsidies, but what else, like equivalent to subsidies in this area?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Maybe I will start just to respond to Karim. So obviously the share of oil and gas industry in the Saudi GDP is way above the one of UAE, but also Saudi is producing 3 times more oil than UAE. So the weight that Saudi Arabia has on the oil price is way bigger. And maybe also second, I will say second comment, and it is also part of the energy transition. We are talking about the generation side with the renewable. Nuclear also is part of the is one of the solutions, and it's good to say it. We not mention it for France, obviously it is obvious for our country. Nuclear is a key asset for us, and a key asset in order to fight carbon emission. But to be said as well that UAE is now has a nuclear capacity able to producing, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has the will to build 2 nuclear reactors, and France is candidate to this program. We have also one short comment regarding my colleague Tanguy. Obviously, I will be very pleased as a developer to have more projects. Okay, I have a question. People have the answer, but I'm not sure the world, and mostly China, is able today to produce enough technologies or equipment in order to develop all this renewable energy project all around the world. Also, one comment for a developer regarding the tendering process. Also, for you to have to have an idea. When a product starts to be in tendering up to the financial close, it lasts minimum 2 years. And then for a project to be built, let's say 2 years. So from the start, when someone says I want a renewable project, to the fact that yes, some renewable being generated by a plant, minimum 4 years. So it is good to have these figures in mind as well. Now, regarding your question, Said, I will try to go fast and not to take my 3 minutes. Saudi Arabia renewable projects do not need subsidies, because the price that we have so far, it's good to say, the solar, it's $10 per megawatt hours. This is the world record price provided by my competitor Aqua. And by the way, even if our records are there to be beaten, I would be surprised if this one will be beat in the months to come. Okay, it will be now very difficult to go below 10, and even I do think the last tender in Saudi were around $15 per megawatt hour. So the market has changed within the last 12 months. And the wind is $20 per megawatt hours. This one is being provided by EDF Renewable, and it's the world record price for wind. So renewable electricity do not need subsidies in Saudi Arabia. There is something where country that's Saudi might, I would say, push for subsidies. It is to localize an industry here in Saudi Arabia. It is a strong will for many countries, we said that the market size is something that matters as well. It is to create a renewable industry, meaning able to manufacture assembly modules, inverters, mast, blades, turbines. And in order to do so, in order to compete with China, subsidies will be requested, will be needed, not for us as developer, but for the technology manufacturers. Okay. So it was my comment.
And it will be like when we are talking, I know that you are dealing basically in projects that they are over 1 megawatt projects, basically. What about like in terms of like, I will say small project, like let's question, for example, somebody who wants to put a roof on the top of his building. This is something like today, like, is it allowed to be done in Saudi Arabia, or it's still just like under control by the government?
Yeah, but maybe also to comment, to give an idea. So EDF Renewable, we have only 2 projects so far in Saudi. One is 400 megawatt, second one is 300. Okay, so they don't have that much. We have only 2, but these 2 are big. Regarding, we say, distributed solar, meaning rooftop, either for the final customer or for the B2B market, the regulation has just been put in place, and it might be a new market for the renewable. I do think as well this sector will need, I would say, some support from the regulatory body. Okay, it's for sure, it's a need, it's a must. I think we have in this region we have to be careful on our whys. Dubai is a good example, but Dubai, it is one city, small city, with 90% of the population concentrated in a small place. And UAE as well, so it's UAE is a big country. Dubai, you have Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but at the end, the geography of this country is way different, and the way the population is being split is way different than a country like Saudi Arabia. And put in place such kind of regulation, it is tough and it is disrupting. So it is quite difficult. So maybe one day wheeling or net metering would be put in place in Saudi, but it is a difficult, not decision, but it is difficult regulatory, I would say, decision to be put in place in a way that it will provide more added value at the end, or social welfare, as the economists could say, to the country, and it's not that easy. So rooftop in Saudi might be allowed, is allowed. It's still difficult because electricity tariffs are low in Saudi, because the price has been associated to oil and gas, and oil and gas are cheap in Saudi. So rooftop will have a future in Saudi. It just started, and we'll see in the future who is going to take the risk.
Awesome. Thank you, Grégory, for the clarification. Thanks. And as you see, the time is running so fast. We're almost at the end of our debate, and I still have one question that I would like to address to Janet. So with the clear outcomes for COP26 about how nations and NGOs are likely to strive to limit and adapt to the effect of climate change, we have the opportunity to make a real difference by acting together. However, what we notice in Middle East, that NGOs are facing some barrier to pursue their emissions, such as lack of understandings about their role in civil societies, perception that government alone is responsible for the well-being of the citizen. Janet, you are very, very close to government, to a lot of, I would say, officials. So what is today in terms of legal framework that will be implemented after the COP26 to recognize the role of NGOs and also let them access to funding and sources?
I think there are a lot of different questions wrapped up in that one. And I think, in fact, the whole of the conversation today really has shown how interconnected all of the different levels of participation in this massive transition are. And I think I earlier on put a comment in the chat bar about different roles of different parts of this. You know, the private sector has a huge role to play in terms of not just of implementation, but also of research development, pushing forward innovation. The private sector has a very different sense of risk management than governments in the public sector do, for example. So you have to work together on these things. At the same time, we also talked about finance today. I have seen recently very much a big change in the financing structures, which is one thing that we wanted to come out of COP26, where financing needs to be made more accessible. It also needs, and I've seen this happening, to be more environmentally, social and governance aware, the so-called ESG criteria. This is a slightly long way to answer your question, because I'm coming down to the point that investments and implementation of projects happen where people live, and they either affect in a good or a bad way the life of that community. They either promote the ability of the community and the people to live better, which is essentially all development is, or it gets in their way and somehow impacts them in a negative way. Very large water dam barrage projects, for example, is a good example of something that affects a community negatively. So the only way, in my view, that you can effectively, as a government, bring about the level of change that we are talking about, that we need across the whole board for this agenda, is for all of these elements to be working together. Now, in many regions, not just in this region, the role of a government, which is seen as very top-down, versus civil society, even versus private, smaller scale private sector, is quite sort of directive, and has always been directive, and never quite seeing why should we listen to them. Why should we listen to the people, the views from the grassroots up? But in fact, we find, and I think it's very evident when you start looking at the way nature-based solutions are really forming part of the policy dialogue now. They're really forming a part of the private sector and innovative solutions, the way that academia is really intertwined with moving this agenda forward. You see that these things have to be together. Now, that also means that now with this agenda, civil society, NGOs, groups that have been used to going out and protesting, say, about governments not paying attention to the needs of people on the ground, also need, I think, to shift a little bit their modalities, because we've now seen governments shifting and private sector shifting towards this new way of taking forward the agenda. And we now need the civil society also to shift so that they're docking and engaging more effectively with these new ways of proceeding. Because it seems to me that we're no longer talking about whether we should change the ways that we're doing things, whether we should stop burning coal. That's already agreed. Now everybody knows that we should stop burning coal, we should start doing things differently. So for me, the question that civil society should really be looking at and bringing in is, how well are we taking account of social and economic needs of communities and people? How well are we paying attention to what they're telling us is happening in their lives? How well are we listening to, for example, the fishermen who are telling us what's happening in the way that they are getting their catch? Or the people in forests who are telling us what is happening about the way nature is changing? How well are we incorporating that into our government level policies and our investment decisions? Because if we don't do that, then we are going to run into problems down the road, because the changes that need to happen are very huge. The behaviors that need to change are there for everybody. They're corporate behaviors, they're government behaviors, and they are individual behaviors and choices. So we need to have everybody in this space. I believe that we could probably, I know governments generally do a lot of outreach to society, a lot of outreach to young people, a lot of outreach in terms of the policies that they're trying to promote. I believe that the private sector could also do more, not only to promote in a technical way the changes that they're doing, but to engage people more effectively in those kind of dialogues. At COP26, the best delegations, national delegations, in my view, were the ones that incorporated within their delegation, the private sector. They incorporated youth negotiators actually in the rooms doing the negotiating. They incorporated elected officials in their official delegation. So they really thought about it and prepared for it before they came to the global conference in order to fully represent all elements of society in what they're doing. So I think these are things, governments shouldn't be afraid of civil society. Civil society is us. So we should all find that way to bring it together and use the value that is in the engagement from grassroots and local levels up to enrich the policy decisions that are made and investment decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks for your answer. That's really put us close to what's happening in NGOs, because they are really centered in the implementation. We cannot agree more than that. As you know, like the debate can go very further because every question have answers and bring more questions. So I just like for the, maybe, I don't know, Tanguy, you want to have something, a comment to make? Tanguy, you have a comment to make?
Yeah, it wasn't on the NGO. So very briefly, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted, it was more going back to the meat of the conversation we had before. Just wanted to flag that for us, and to answer Alain's question. So we see actually the oil demand is going to shift from developed countries importers to developing countries. And so actually we don't see the share of OPEC going down in the world. We actually see going up. And so what's really important, and I think we spoke about energy efficiency, and that is indeed really important, but one thing that we don't often look at is the actual energy efficiency of extracting oil. So there is no way where we can do without oil in the world right now and for the many years to come. The best thing we can do, and the thing that those countries should focus on, is making sure that it's the cleanest possible. And so by that, we mean that the emission intensity of oil should go down, and we have the means to do that very cost effectively. And so I think those countries should focus on this. We estimate that it can be done the intensity can fall by 65% in 2030. And the first aspect to tackle, and I think going back to what was announced at COP, is the methane emissions from oil and gas extraction. And so we think it is important to address everything, every part of the energy efficiency, buildings, transport, industry. But one key opportunity those countries have is to actually address the emission intensity from the oil and gas sector. And so that just wanted to put that on the table.
And maybe, Tanguy, if I may, just to give an example. So sure. The world today is producing, or is consuming 90 million of barrels. Saudi is producing 12 million of barrels. If tomorrow the world consume only 20 million of barrels, Saudi will still produce 12.
Yeah.
It is good to say. It's good to say it like that, and it is to just illustrate their strengths on this market.
Good transition, Grégory. Thank you. So we have a lot of questions coming from the audience, and we're already kind of overlapping through them. What we're going to happen, in order to answer the Q&A, I will ask every speaker, when you get their questions, it's 2 minutes question. So we have a chance to cover most of them. I will ask Sandrine Benatar. She helped us to organize the event. She's from ESSEC Transition Alumni Club, and she will be asking you these questions, specific questions by names.
And Said, I have to apologize. I will have to leave in 5 minutes. I will be pleased to, just for you to know, because French president, French president is coming in Saudi this week, so the week is quite intensive. So thank you. I have to apologize for that.
So I'll start by a question for which was addressed to Tanguy. What is the place for sobriety and growth in the scenarios to fight the global warming? I didn't have time to recheck what I was reading from the chat. So That's brute questions.
Thank you. And we had this debate with Alain a few times already. The IEA sees some role, but limited role for what we call them behavior changes. We think they're really important and we can't do without them, but they will not be enough. We have, unfortunately, we're at a stage where it's important, they're important to integrate, but we have to rely on technologies, investments, and large scale investment in clean energy. But we do at the IEA, we sort of separate those two parts. There's sobriety can be labeled as behavior change. We also, what the biggest role we see is for demand reduction. And so that's not necessarily the same, but so in demand reduction, we include investment on energy efficiency, the reduction of energy intensity. So I like to include them into sobriety and growth, but it's I know it's a big debate. It also depends, and I'll try to stay short, but it also depends who you're talking to, which country you're talking to. It's much easier to ask French people to reduce their consumption than people that did not have the chance to develop the same way we did, and so it is a loaded geographical question.
Said, can I ask a question to Tanguy, actually, following this question? Just to,
yes, please.
Sandrine, sorry. Well, Tanguy, actually, around this question, you do have, because at the arena, we are reviewing actually 100% renewable scenario. And actually, we are also adding the IEA scenario, and I'm looking at it, actually. And to be fair, there is an issue with growth somehow, where the climate change would impact actually growth, GDP, by X%. I mean, you do have some, reports about that. And I didn't find that somehow in the report, meaning that I would say the systemic risks somehow, you see, of the energy transition are not really part of the trajectory. So how do you approach that?
It's a question we often get, and it's true that we don't we assume actually a steady growth, like global growth. We don't retro loop the impacts of climate change in our current scenarios on growth. That's a limitation we have currently on our scenario, indeed.
Will you do that? I mean, are you working on that or not yet? Or
I can't. So we just finished the WEO, so we're not right now updating our scenarios, but I'll make sure to feed that back to the team.
Okay.
Thank you. Sandrine?
So thank you, Tanguy, for daring to answer the daring questions. So I have other question for example, Grégory. Given the ideal position of Saudi Arabia, do you think that Saudi Arabia is willing to export some of its green electricity to the Middle East region?
Okay, so I would say Saudi and GCC country are interconnected, but not as much as we can see in Europe. And I do think the first wheel of renewable development in Saudi Arabia, it is first to cover its own demand, electricity demand. What Saudi Arabia could export using, I would say, its natural resource, such as renewable, is the green H2, green hydrogen, or green ammonia. I would say the will of the kingdom is to act as an exporter of green ammonia, because it's hard to export H2, green H2, I would say, as it is right now. The technology might not be suitable, so it is, you have to change the hydrogen into ammonia. Sorry. So the thing, obviously, the kingdom will export ammonia, or will export as well ammonia that can be green, ammonia that can be blue as well, because they have blue H2 as well. It is something important. I think the question that countries such as the kingdom has to answer, it is how green ammonia or green H2 can replace, I would say, all the benefit that the country has in terms of oil in 20 years. It is a major question for them, how hydrogen or ammonia can replace the revenue of the oil that is that they have today. Okay.
Thank you, Grégory. Thank you. Sandrine, we have just 5 minutes.
I will have to leave, so thank you all of you, and thank you, Said, for the organization.
Thanks,
I really appreciate your time.
Later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye, Grégory.
So another question for Karim. In Europe, solar and wind are intermittent. Is it the same in the Arabian Peninsula? And if so, are you developing means of storage to manage this intermittence?
Yeah, I mean, solar and wind, structurally, they do depend on light and wind resource. So any place in the world, they will still depend on wind and light. So now the question is, how, what's the probability? Basically, you do the volatility actually of wind resource and solar resource. So the volatility of solar resource is extremely low actually in the UAE and GCC. So you barely have clouds, basically cloudy days. You see clouds from far away and they are going very slowly. One day. So basically for solar it's really stable, but obviously it does not produce at night, and you do have cloudy days. For wind, that's as usual, you do have the resource which is going up and down. So now about storage. So it's not because it's intermittent that you need storage. If you take, for example, Europe and the need for storage, just recently, let's take France, for example. Okay. France, 100% renewable energy scenario. So it's full of renewable energy and full of intermittency. Actually, storage, you have either daily storage, so it's the batteries, and the size of the battery is very small actually, because it's per day. So we're talking about for whole France, maybe 10, 20 gigawatts of batteries only to support the grid. But you do have long-term storage, and that is roughly maybe around the 5-6% of the demand, per country. So it's same in the US, same in Germany, same in France, etc. But when do you need actually long-term storage? You're very far from needing that in the UAE. In the UAE, it's 10%. You see renewable energy of the overall electricity. So before you need actually storage, you need a way, much more penetration actually of renewable energy. So you do have, depending on the penetration, like 30%, 50%, above 50%, etc. You need different flexibility tools, and flexibility, it's not necessarily storage. It's also from the demand actually. And that is about smart grid, about buildings, about reducing, for example, peak demand. And in the UAE, peak demand is massive because at lunchtime, air conditioning is everywhere. So you can actually reduce peak demand, and that's very important, aspects of intermittency. So storage, I would say, it's not yet key for the UAE and not for GCC also, but you will see that coming step by step. But flexibility of the demand, interconnection would be actually very, very much important also in the coming years.
Thanks, Karim. Thank you very much. Thanks. We have still for the last question. Last question, please.
Okay. Are there some measures taken to reduce consumption on the building side? And there is a last question, but it will be homework for.
The question is for Sandrine.
No, anybody, not precise.
Okay. So who's the free who wants to take the question? Can you repeat it maybe?
I'm happy to give you a comment. Okay. And I'll go along to not just in this region, but elsewhere as well. I think there's a huge amount going into building sustainable cities, and that connects across to the sustainable development agenda as well as to this climate and energy agenda. I have seen myself in the Gulf, and I'm sure others who are living there are seeing it as well, the increased use of building codes to determine the energy efficiency, plus also energy appliances, innovations like district cooling, rather than individual air conditioning efforts to try and reduce water consumption, for example, and make that more efficient. So I think there are things that are coming in out there. Again, it's a big thing, and it goes to education as well. Are we training climate resilient architects and construction experts and project managers? So this is another big area of just showing that climate response and action is interconnected across so many different parts of the agenda. We can't expect the whole society and the transport systems and the way we live, especially in very modernized cities and very intensive living, to be climate resilient and climate friendly unless we train the right kind of people to do that for us and to build them and operate them. So I think that's really important. It's also very important, let's not forget, from a governance perspective, to make sure that city councils, city mayors, and the rest actually respond to these requirements.
Okay, thanks. I posted the last question, who was for Janet or Mustapha.
But Sandrine, I think it's Sandrine.
Yes. Okay. But maybe they can answer later, as you
Yes, the answer later, because we're running out of time.
That's why I posted it. It will be the homework.
We will send them an email on it, and we will send it back to the audience.
Because
so yes, we're really going time here, and I would like first congratulate to the quality guest speakers. I would like to say thank you very much for joining us tonight, for bringing all this available information, which will help us definitely understand what is the stake of implementing climate change in Arabia Peninsula and post-oil transition. Really appreciate that. Hope we have other webinars where we can learn from you and share your knowledge with us. At the same time, I would like also to congratulate all the organizer team. So we have a team who helped us organize this evening. First of all, the club is ESSEC Transition Alumni with Sandrine and Alain. Thank you very much for helping us. And also with Adrien Foreman, who is representing the Sustainable Development Alumni Club. We have we've been getting a lot of help from the president of ESSEC chapters in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, Nadine Al-Kamar Nassar and Gerwan Logak. They help us organize this event. And finally, big thanks to ESSEC alumni staff who's working with us for weeks, bringing and working and preparing all the presentations. Chloe, thank you very much for your help. Before ending the evening, I have just like a little announcement to make. I would like to give you some quick news about ESSEC Business School. Maybe you already seen communication about it. So we are currently building a campus for 2023. So it's a new campus that we would like that respect the principle and the value of green transition. We've been, Janet mentioned building, green building. So we would like to have a campus that have the same value of, we call it green campus. And through the month of November, it was a month of donation. ESSEC alumni will be basically receiving donation from different communities, and at the same time, there will be how we call the matching of all donation from the ESSEC fund. So I will share with the people who want to donate tonight. I will send with you the link, so you will donate. At the same time, I am going to share the video about the campus 2023 for your information. So we have the video. Share this. Yeah. Okay. Also, before you see the video, I would like to inform you that there is a questionnaire about tonight. A questionnaire, a satisfactory questionnaire. I would like to get your feedbacks about how did you like about the experience. What do you want us as advice to improve ourselves for next webinars? So let's start the video, and thank you very much.
Bonjour, je suis Gilles Pélisson, donc ESSEC 79 et président de la campagne de fundraising Campus 2023 qui est en train de voir le jour, à savoir augmenter et dynamiser le site de Cergy. Ce sera le Pierre Nanterme Center for Responsible Leadership, qui sera un bâtiment où effectivement on pourra venir travailler, partager des expériences. On aura une Green Tower, et la Green Tower qui sera un centre de recherche.
Ce bâtiment sera exemplaire aussi au niveau environnemental, puisqu'en fait il va être composé d'une double peau climatique qui va permettre d'avoir une autorégulation du bâtiment sans apport d'électricité et de climatisation mécanique.
Et puis enfin, le gymnase, qui sera donc un sport center, mais nouvelle génération.
Dans les horaires où nos étudiants sont pris par les cours et n'utilisent pas ces installations, pouvoir les offrir leur utilisation à des associations locales scolaires, ce qui permet aussi une meilleure mixité des populations sur le territoire.
Il nous reste 6 millions d'euros à lever pour boucler la totalité du budget, 6 millions d'euros dans les 3 années qui viennent. Et pour ce faire, nous allons faire appel à la générosité des alumni.
Sans campus, sans cette formidable construction et modernité, l'ESSEC ne pourra pas maintenir sa place dans le rang des grandes universités internationales. Aujourd'hui, le combat il se joue partout dans le monde entier et l'ESSEC doit être là.
Pour que l'ESSEC rayonne aujourd'hui et demain et porte haut ses valeurs humanistes et son esprit pionnier, pour éclairer et transformer le monde, nous avons besoin de vous.